The wind blew cold over the walls of Storm's End, where three old friends stood facing the sea Eddard Stark, Robert Baratheon, and Stannis Baratheon. Time had aged them, but war had never left their bones. The realm had changed. The Targaryens, once thought finished, were rising again. Daenerys Stormborn had crossed the narrow sea with her dragons, and Jon Snow, Ned's own blood, had bent the knee to her. Robert, heavier and more tired than ever, still had that fire in his eyes. "I should have crushed every last Targaryen when I had the chance," he muttered, gripping the hilt of his warhammer. "You killed Rhaegar," Ned reminded him quietly. "That should have been enough." "Clearly it wasn't," Stannis said, his voice sharp like his jawline. He stood straight as ever, always holding himself like a king no one had crowned. "The dragons have returned, and the realm will burn if we do nothing." They had come together not for a council of peace, but for war. The north was restless. The Stormlands were fractured. The Reach and Dorne were silent, watching. And in King's Landing, Queen Cersei had locked the gates, fearing dragons and ghosts from the past. Ned was torn. He had always believed in duty, honor, and peace. But he had also raised Jon Snow like a son. If Jon believed Daenerys could rule, then why did it feel so wrong? "She's not her father," Ned said, more to himself than the others. "She cannot be." Stannis gave him a look. "Blood speaks, Stark, and Targaryen blood speaks in fire and madness." Robert scoffed. "I've seen what their madness does. Burned my father, strangled my brother. And now she's burning cities. She'd burn us all." They had heard the stories. The sack of Lannisport by dragonfire. The fields outside Old Town turned to ash. The unsullied marching. The Dothraki screaming through the riverlands. And above all, the roar of Drogon, the last of the three dragons, grown wild and monstrous. But it wasn't just Daenerys they feared. It was the idea that people had begun to love her. Songs were sung of the breaker of chains. The small folk whispered her name with hope. And Jon Snow, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, was standing at her side. "We should have killed Jon Snow," Robert growled. "No," Ned said sharply. "He is my blood." "Then your blood is a threat to all of us," Stannis added coldly. Silence followed, the kind that comes before a storm. Ned walked toward the battlements, looking down at the waves. "I swore an oath," he said, "to protect the realm, to protect my family. If Jon and Daenerys threaten the realm, then I will face them. But I will not kill my son." Robert stepped beside him. "Then we go north. We gather what banners we can, and we ride not for peace, but for truth. One last war. One last chance to shape the realm before it falls to fire and shadow." "And if the dragons come?" Stannis asked. Robert looked him dead in the eye. "Then we slay them like the old kings did, with steel, fury, and God's willing, treachery." It was then agreed. The last lords of the old rebellion, Robert, Ned, and Stannis, would rise again. But they were older now. Their allies were scattered, their enemies stronger. Still, the fire had returned to their hearts. This would not be a war of politics. This would not be whispers and shadows. This would be fire and blood again. And this time, perhaps no one would survive it. They rode from Storm's End under the cover of night, their banners rolled tight, their names unspoken. Robert, Ned, and Stannis knew the realm had changed, and the people they once ruled with steel and fire might now see them as rebels, not heroes. Their first stop was the Eyrie. Jon Arryn was long dead, but his son, young Lord Robin, still ruled behind high walls. Swaying in the hands of schemers for too long, he was now barely a man, more interested in toys than thrones. But his knight still guarded the Vale, and the Vale's strength mattered. Robert cursed as they climbed the mountain. The boy's mother was mad, and the boys know better. But his army fights well enough. Ned rode beside him, quiet as always, but his thoughts were louder than ever. Was this the right path? To march against Daenerys? Against Jon? Against the blood he swore to protect? The summit revealed the answer. Robin, pale and twitching with fear, refused to see them. His master delivered the message. The veil would not rise. Stannis took it as insult. Then let the veil rot in its cradle. They left before dawn. No banners. No war cries. Just silence. Their next hope was the Riverlands, old Tullyland. Catelyn's land. Edmure was back in River Run, thanks to the Dragon Queen's mercy after the Lannisters fell. But mercy, they realized, came with a chain. Edmure met them in secret. Gray streaks ran through his beard now, and his back was bent with guilt. Daenerys spared me, gave my wife and son their lives. If I turn on her now? You think mercy lasts forever? Robert thundered. She burns cities, Edmure. She feeds people to dragons. She freed the slaves, Edmure countered weakly. She broke the wheel. She replaced the wheel with her fire, Stannis growled. Ned stepped forward, soft but firm. Edmure, we don't ask for war. We ask for balance. If she becomes what her father was, we must be ready. Edmure looked at his uncle, then at Robert, then at the cold eyes of Stannis. Finally, he nodded. The Riverlands will not fight against you. It wasn't a promise to fight for them, but it was a start. Still, they were outnumbered. Daenerys had the Unsullied, the Dothraki, her own loyal northern bannermen, and worst of all Jon Snow. Reports came like whispers in the wind. Jon's been named Warden of the North. He rides at the Queen's side. He calls her his queen, and something more, Robert grunted. He's fallen for her, hasn't he? Ned didn't answer. They stopped next in the Reach, hoping to find old allies. But there was nothing left. The Tyrells were gone, and the fields that once fed the realm now burned under dragonfire. Small folk fled toward the coast, starving, terrified. They saw it with their own eyes. Whole villages turned to ash, blackened earth, melted stone, the sky filled with smoke. It wasn't war anymore. It was cleansing. This is what she brings, Stannis said, standing amid the ruins of a burned granary. Glory for her. Graves for everyone else. And still, people called her Mother of Dragons. Still, they believed in her. In a torn inn at the edge of the Reach, they sat in silence. A boy no older than 10 served them bread. When Robert asked him if he'd seen the Queen's men, the boy smiled. She flew over 2 nights ago, he whispered. She's beautiful. Robert downed his ale and slammed the cup. Beautiful? You call that? He stopped when he saw the boy's eyes. Pure wonder. Pure faith. They love her, Robert muttered. She gave them something to believe in, Ned said. And we gave them only war. Stannis was unmoved. Then we take their belief and crush it under our boots. That night, a raven came. The seal bore the Stark direwolf. Ned's hands shook as he read it. Jon Snow was marching south, with Daenerys, with dragons, with fire. Their path would cross in 3 days. The fields of Blackwater Rush would be their meeting place, and the war that once ended the Targaryens would begin again. But this time, the dragons weren't dying. They were waiting. The skies darkened as the 3 old rebels rode toward Blackwater Rush. Every hoofbeat echoed louder than the last. They weren't just riding into battle. They were riding into the ghosts of their past, the place where Robert first crushed Rhaegar, where the rebellion had turned into legend. And now, history was circling back to that same cursed river. Robert rode ahead, his great warhammer strapped across his back. His armor didn't shine like it once did. It was dented, rusted, blood-stained. But the man beneath it still carried rage like fire in his veins. Stannis rode silently beside him, sharp as ever, a man made of stone and duty. And Ned, the quiet wolf, stayed just a step behind, heavy with thought, his heart torn in 2 directions. They saw the smoke first, Then they heard it. The dragon's roar. Dragon. He tore across the sky like a demon, black wings blotting out the sun. A sight of him froze their bones. The beast had grown, larger than any living creature should be. Fire dripped from his jaws like saliva. The heat of his breath made the trees bend. Robert didn't flinch. Let him come. Let the bitch burn me. I'll die standing. But it wasn't just Dragon coming. 1,000 Unsullied marched over the hill, shields gleaming in grim formation. Behind them, the Dothraki screamed like wild ghosts, riding at full speed, blades raised high. And between them, Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. Ned's heart sank. Jon looked older, harder. His eyes were no longer the unsure gaze at the bastard boy Ned raised. They were the eyes of a man who had killed, ruled, and meant to fire. And Daenerys, her face was beautiful, but cold. Her silver hair whipped in the wind, and her eyes glowed like a storm. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just stared ahead like a queen looking down at ants. Robert spat. She looks just like Rhaella. Same mad fire in the eyes. Not yet, Ned whispered. Not yet. A lone rider came forward. It was Jon. He dismounted halfway and walked slowly toward them. Unarmed, unafraid. Robert was the first to speak. You should be dead, boy. You wear the wrong banners. Jon looked at them, all his uncle Ned, the man who raised him. Robert, the king he never served. And Stannis, the cold shadow of duty. He looked tired, but not weak. I don't want this fight, Jon said. We've already bled too much. Then tell your queen to turn her beast around, Stannis replied. Tell her to leave Westeros, or we'll put her in the ground next to her ancestors. Jon's jaw clenched. You think you can stop her? Look behind me. She has dragons. She has armies. She has the people, Robert sneered. People are fools. They cheered for Aerys too, before he lit them on fire. She's not Aerys. She burned a village last week, Stannis snapped, for refusing to pay grain. She gave them 3 chances, Jon replied sharply. They chose rebellion. She ended it. Ned finally stepped forward. His voice was lower, more human. Jon, you've become what we fought to stop. Jon's eyes softened. I did what I had to save the realm. You don't know what's coming. Then tell us, Ned pleaded. Convince us. But Jon just looked away. A pause, a silence heavier than any blade. Then Robert pulled out his warhammer. No more talking, he growled. If you stand with her, you die with her. Jon took a breath, looked at Ned one last time, and walked back to his army. And so it began. The fields of Blackwater Rush, once soaked with Targaryen blood, would run red again. Drums sounded. The Dothraki charged. Unsullied formed ranks. Stannis barked orders. Robert roared like a beast. Ned drew his sword, heart aching, knowing the worst part of war was always when the ones you loved were on the other side. Above them, Dragon screamed, and fire fell from the sky. Flames poured from the sky like a river of death. Dragon circled above, roaring as fire washed across the battlefield. Horses screamed. Men turned to ash before they could raise a shield. The Dothraki swept through like a storm of blades, cutting down anyone in their path. Robert was the first to charge. With me. He bellowed, swinging his warhammer with brutal fury. The ground shook beneath him. He knocked riders from their saddles like flies. His rage was the same that had shattered Rhaegar's chest by the trident raw, blind, unstoppable. Stannis took the flank with his bannermen silent, precise, burning with grim resolve. He cut through unsullied formations, not with speed, but with method. Each move calculated. Each swing of his sword a lesson in death. And Ned fought like a man trying to protect a dream already dying. He didn't want this war. He didn't want to see Jon fall, or Daenerys burn. But he fought Because he had to. Because honor doesn't stop wars. Only steel does. The battlefield became chaos. Drogon swooped low again. This time, his fire caught one of Robert's siege towers, lighting it like a candle. Men screamed as they burned alive. Robert looked up and roared, "Come down, you monster! Face me!" Drogon didn't listen. He only screamed back, a sound that shook the air like thunder. Then came Jon. He rode into the heart of the chaos, his blade lone claw glinting. He wasn't looking for Robert or Stannis. He was riding for Ned. Ned saw him coming. He didn't raise his sword. Jon stopped his horse just short. They faced each other in the smoke and blood. "You taught me better than this," Jon said, eyes full of pain. "And you were better than this," Ned replied, voice trembling. "Why are you here?" "Because she's becoming her father." "No," Jon said firmly, "she's not. She's doing what you never had the courage to do, breaking the chains, even if it means breaking bones." Ned stepped forward. "She's burning children, Jon." Jon's lips pressed tight. "War burns everyone. Peace never came without fire." Before Ned could answer, a shadow moved behind Jon. Stannis, blade raised, silent as judgment. "No!" Ned shouted. But it was too late. Jon turned just in time to parry the blow. Sparks flew as steel met steel. He leapt back, drawing Longclaw fully. "You come to kill me too?" he shouted. "You're the blood of Rhaegar," Stannis said coldly. "That makes you a threat." "I bled for this realm," Jon growled. "I died for it." "Then die again." Stannis lunged. Their blades clashed violently. It wasn't a duel, it was a storm. Jon fought with speed and emotion. Stannis fought with anger buried deep. They moved in the mud, slipping, slashing, growling like wolves in a pit. Ned tried to stop them, but Drogon's shadow returned. And this time he landed. The ground cracked under his weight. Fire curled from his throat. Daenerys dismounted. She wore no crown, no armor, just a red dress soaked in rain and blood. She walked toward Ned like a queen who had walked through hell, and decided to keep going. "Ned Stark," she said, her voice ice-wrapped in flame. He raised his sword, not at her, but at the ground. "It didn't have to be this way." "No," she agreed, "but you came anyway. With the same men who destroyed my house. The same warhammer that killed my brother." Robert appeared behind her, blood on his face, laughing like a man who no longer feared death. "Tell your dragon to burn me, girl," he shouted. "Let's see if fire can kill what's already dead inside." Daenerys didn't flinch. She raised her hand. Drogon growled, throat glowing. Dracarys, the fire leapt, but something stopped it. Jon. He jumped between them, lone claw raised, eyes wide with rage. "No more!" he screamed. "No more burning." The fire hit him like a wave, but he didn't move. And the fire passed around him, untouched. Everyone froze. Even Drogon stepped back. Jon's clothes were singed, but his skin was unharmed. The battlefield went silent. Even Daenerys looked shaken. "Impossible," she whispered. Jon turned slowly. "I am not Rhaegar. I am not Aerys. And I am not your enemy." Ned's sword lowered. Robert stared, stunned. Stannis looked afraid for the first time in his life. And Daenerys looked at Jon like she had just seen a god. The silence after the fire was heavier than the roar that came before it. Jon stood in the middle of the battlefield, cloaked in smoke, flames flickering harmlessly around his feet. Soldiers from both sides froze in disbelief unsullied. The Thraki and bannermen of the old rebellion stared at him like he was something not of this world. Even mighty Drogon growled low and lowered his head, not in defeat, but in recognition. In submission, Robert broke the silence with a grunt. "What, in the name of the Seven, are you?" Jon turned to him, calm but with fire in his eyes. "I'm a Stark and a Targaryen, and maybe it's time this realm stopped choosing between the two." Daenerys was pale now. Her face, always so strong, showed something it never had before: doubt. She took a step back, her mouth slightly open. You survived Dragonfire," she whispered. "I didn't survive it," Jon said. "It didn't touch me." The way he looked at her wasn't hatred, but it wasn't love anymore either. It was something colder. "And that should terrify you." Robert laughed bitterly. "So now what? He's a bloody god, and we're just men swinging steel like fools?" "No," Ned said, stepping beside Jon. "He's just what this realm needs, and none of us were." Stannis still held his sword, eyes locked on Jon like he might strike again. But his grip loosened. Slowly he sheathed it, jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might snap. "Magic, fire, blood, and bastards," he muttered. "Always the bloody bastards." Daenerys looked at Jon like a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing the fall would never end. "You bent the knee to me." "I bent the knee to save lives," Jon said. "But if saving lives now means standing against you, I will." The battlefield cracked. Not from fire or steel, but from what those words meant. Daenerys' eyes filled with something new. Not just anger, betrayal. "I gave you everything, Jon. You gave me ashes," he said. Then he turned to the field soldiers still holding weapons, unsure of what to do. Two armies on the edge of total war. Frozen. "This doesn't have to end with more dead," Jon shouted. "No more kings, no more queens. No more tyrants who think they were born to rule because their ancestors rode dragons." The words hit like arrows in the air. Daenerys stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You sound like them. Like the ones who killed my family." "I sound like someone who doesn't want to burn another child alive," Jon snapped. For the first time, Daenerys looked around, truly looked. She saw the dead, the burning trees, the smoke rising from what used to be fields and homes. Her own doing. And her face cracked. For a moment, she looked like a girl again. A girl who'd lost everything. Who crossed deserts, lost brothers, was sold like meat. Who only ever ruled by taking what wasn't given. And for that moment, her rage vanished. She whispered, "Then what happens now?" Jon looked at Ned, at Robert, at Stannis, at all the ghosts of the rebellion. "You all fought to end the Targaryens. You did it with fire, steel, and blood. But all you ever did was replace one bad ruler with another. I won't do that." He looked at the gathered armies. "I won't sit the Iron Throne." Robert rolled his eyes. "Then what? We let the realm fall into chaos?" "No," Jon said. "We give it back to the people. Let the lords choose their ruler. Let the voices that have never been heard finally matter." "Break the wheel for real this time," Stannis scoffed. "You think giving peasants power will fix the realm?" Jon met his cold gaze. "It couldn't make it worse." And Ned did something no one expected. He dropped his sword and knelt. Robert stared. "Ned, he's right," Ned said. "We fought to destroy tyranny, not to keep it alive wearing different colors." One by one, others followed. Edmure Tully stepped forward. Davos Seaworth. Even a few unsullied lowered their spears. Robert cursed under his breath, but dropped his warhammer. Only Daenerys stood, alone, eyes wild. "You want a realm without dragons? Without queens? Without bloodlines?" Jon stepped closer. "I want a realm without fear." Daenerys turned, looked at Drogon, her last dragon, her last child. And then she climbed onto his back. Without a word, she took to the sky. No fire, no threats, just silence. A queen flying away from the throne she would never have. And on the field below, men who once marched for war stood still, wondering if, for the first time in generations, the fighting was truly over. For days after Daenerys vanished into the sky, the realm held its breath. No one knew where she had gone. Some said she flew across the narrow sea to Essos. Others whispered she flew north to hide among the snows. But one thing was certain. She didn't look back. She left behind her armies, her claim, and her throne. All she took was Drogon and her fury. The battlefield at Blackwater Rush became something no one expected. A council. Jon refused to claim the Iron Throne. He refused to be called king. Instead, he gathered the remaining lords and generals, those who had followed Robert, Stannis, Ned, even Daenerys, and demanded something Westeros had never seen: a voice for the realm, a choice. Robert hated it. He drank like a man, trying to forget he wasn't in charge anymore. "You let farmers vote, and they'll elect the bloody pig," he muttered one night. Stannis, of course, opposed it too. Laws aren't made in camps or fields. Power must follow blood. But it was Ned who pushed the idea forward. Quietly, firmly. "The throne was made of swords," he said. "Maybe it's time we stopped making rulers out of steel and fear." Jon insisted each region send a representative, not just lords, but voices of the people. The idea spread like wildfire, and not everyone was pleased. The Vale refused. The Iron Islands mocked it. But the Riverlands, the North, and some in the Reach began to consider the impossible. A realm without a single crown. Meanwhile, chaos bubbled beneath the surface. Without Daenerys, her army splintered. The Dothraki scattered, some raiding villages, others trying to sail home. The Unsullied remained in silence, commanderless, leaderless. They set up camp near the ruins of King's Landing, guarding the broken throne as if waiting for a ghost to return. Whispers spread quickly through the cities. Jon Snow is the true heir. He cannot burn. Maybe he's a god. Jon hated every word. He walked among soldiers like a man haunted, refusing titles, refusing praise. "I'm not your king," he said again and again. But the more he rejected power, the more people gave it to him in their hearts. Then came a letter. A raven from Dragonstone. The message was short 5 words. "She's coming back, with fire." Daenerys wasn't hiding. She was building. She had returned to the ruins of her ancestors. Old Valyria. No one had gone there in centuries. It was cursed, full of ash and magic. But she had gone. And the dragonfire there had answered her. Reports came from Essos. Fires in the night. Red priests gathering. The Dothraki who followed her vanishing into the mountains, drawn by some new vision. "She's going to raise an army," Davos warned. "One that won't just conquer Westeros. One that will punish it." "She's angry," Ned said quietly. "We saw the break in her. This time there won't be a battlefield. There'll only be fire." Robert slammed his mug. "We should have killed her when we had the chance." Stannis nodded. "She's coming to burn the whole world down." Jon stood at the edge of the council chamber, looking out the window toward the sea. "If she comes back with fire," he said slowly, "then we meet her with truth. And if that doesn't work?" Robert growled. Jon turned. His voice was steady, cold. "Then I'll stop her. Whatever it takes." There was silence. Then Ned asked the question no one dared speak. "And if you must kill her?" Jon didn't answer. But his silence was louder than any vow. Storms rolled in from the east, blackening the skies like a warning from the gods. The sea turned violent, churning with wind and rain. But it wasn't the weather that chilled the bones of Westeros. It was her return. Daenerys Targaryen flew over Dragonstone, once more, but not alone. Behind her came ships bearing the red flame of the Lord of Light, sails stitched with Valyrian glyphs. On their decks marched new warriors, fire worshippers, pale-skinned Essosi fanatics who had seen her walk through flame and called her Azor Ahai reborn. Drogon had changed. He was no longer just a beast of war. He had grown. hardened. His wingspan could black out a city. His eyes burned like two suns, and his roar split clouds. She had come back not as a queen, but as a judgment. Her message was simple, carved into scorched rock and dropped on every castle gate from Dragonstone to King's Landing. Bend the knee or burn. Jon stood atop the broken walls of King's Landing. What was left of the city half ruined by her last fire had now become his final stand. Not a throne, not a capital. A graveyard waiting to happen. She's not coming to conquer, Davos said grimly beside him. She's coming to finish the story. Robert had returned to the field, armor strapped over his wide chest. Let her come. I've killed Targaryens before. One more won't. She kill you in the first breath, Ned interrupted. This isn't the girl you mocked in the rebellion. She's something else now. She believes the gods chose her, that the world must burn to be reborn. And maybe she's right, Stannis muttered from the shadows. Maybe Westeros does need cleansing. Jon looked at them all. Old kings, old killers, old ghosts. No more burning, he said quietly. No more screaming children, no more mothers clutching ashes. I end this. The next morning he rode alone. He climbed the cliffs of Dragonstone, unarmed, cloak soaked with sea rain. Drogon landed before him like thunder, and the fire in his throat made the rocks boil. But he didn't burn Jon. He moved aside. Let him pass. Daenerys stood at the altar of her ancestors. Stone carvings of old dragons loomed above her. Her hair was damp, braided with fire-colored rubies. She looked like a goddess forged from war. You came, she said. I had to. I warned them, she said. I offered peace. You offered submission to fire. I offered salvation. Jon stepped forward. They won't kneel. You'll kill thousands. Maybe more. She stared at him. Her voice was quieter now. And what did they offer me, Jon? When I was sold like meat in Essos? When they spat on my name? When they killed my family? I didn't do that. No, she whispered. But you have their blood. He didn't argue. He knew what she meant. She walked toward him slowly. Do you love me still? His eyes dropped. I don't know what I feel anymore. I love you, she said. I wanted to build a new world with you. But if you won't rule with me, Jon looked up. Then what? Her voice cracked. Then I'll rule without you. She reached for his hand. He didn't take it. And that was the end. A single tear slid down her cheek. You've made your choice, she whispered. She turned. Drogon screamed behind them, wings rising. The heat grew. Jon stepped forward, slowly drawing Longclaw. Daenerys. She looked back, eyes full of heartbreak and madness. I am the fire, he whispered, and I'm the last snow. In a flash, he struck. The blade went through her heart. Her eyes widened, betrayal, sorrow, and something else. Relief. She collapsed in his arms, gasping. Was it ever real? She asked. Jon's eyes blurred. Yes. Then she died. Drogon screamed so loud the skies cracked. He didn't burn Jon. He burned the stone around him, melted the walls, screamed his pain to the heavens. Then he scooped her body into his claws and flew away, vanished, gone. The last dragon, taking the last Targaryen. Jon stood alone, sword red, soul broken. The war was over. No cheers, no songs, just silence. In the days that followed, the lords gathered again not to crown a king, but to begin anew. Jon refused any title. He returned to the north, to silence, to snow. Robert disappeared into the taverns. Stannis faded into a forgotten corner of the Stormlands. And Ned remained as Warden of the North, helping rebuild what fire had taken. The Iron Throne was never rebuilt. And for the first time in centuries, there was no king. Only a broken realm, learning to stand on its own feet. A world without dragons. But maybe, just maybe, something better.